Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Briefings Direct Voice of the Customer podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at InterArbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on digital transformation success stories. Stay with us now to learn how agile businesses are fending off disruption in favor of innovation. Our next Thought Leader interview examines how Nokia is refactoring the video delivery business. We'll now learn about new video delivery architectures and creative ways that media companies are paying for them. Here to describe new models of IP video and time-managed financing models, we're joined by Paul Larby. He's the head of the video business unit at Nokia and based in the Cambridge, UK. Welcome.
Hey, Dana, great to be here.
We're glad to have you. So how have video trends come together in the past few years that have made it necessary for thinking about architectures, thinking about pricing models, business models? It seems like the video delivery business is in a bit of upheaval right now.
Yeah, I think to take that question, it's good to look back. Right? So we sit here in 2017, but let's look back 10 years in 2007. And I think there were a couple of key events in 2007 that dramatically shaped how we all consume video today, and certainly the technology that, as a company, we bring to market. The first one was 10 years ago was the creation of the iPhone. Right? The iPhone sparked a whole new device type, moving eventually into the iPad. But not only that, Apple, underneath that, were developing a lot of the technology in terms of how you stream video, how you protect video over IP, a lot of the technology underneath that we still use today. So not only did they create a new sort of device type or avenue for us to watch our video on, they created some new underlying protocols underneath. The other thing that happened was Netflix. 10 years ago, Netflix began their first ever streaming service. So if you look back, actually, in that 1 year, how we all consume our video today was dramatically changed by a couple of events that happened sort of 10 years ago. So now if we fast forward, let's see where that goes in the future, right? And I think there's two key trends that really drive and exaggerate some of the challenges we have today. Is, firstly, video becomes truly mobile. And we talk about mobile video a lot today, but really we mean watching some films on our sort of iPads or on our iPhones, so not on a big TV is what generally most people mean by mobile video today. But if you think about taking your video with you, you want to be able to take all your content with you. You can't do that today. That has to happen in the future. When you're in an airplane, you can't take your content with you. Again, you need that connectivity needs to extend so you can take your content with you no matter where you are. And take a simple example of a driverless car. Right? So the moment you're driving along, you're watching the sat nav, watching the traffic, keeping the kids quiet in the back. When driverless cars come in, what are you going to be doing? You're still going to be keeping the kids quiet, but there's a void there of activity that needs to be filled, and clearly extending the content into the car is the natural next step. And the final element of that is personalization. TV becomes a lot more personalized. Today we all get the same user experience. If we're all on the same service provider, it looks the same, it's the same color, it's the same grid. There's no reason why that should be the same. That should be the case. There's no reason why my kids shouldn't have a different user interface, where the user interface that's presented to me in the morning is maybe different than the user interface that's presented to me in the evening. There's no reason why I should have 10 pages of channels that I have to go through to find something I want to watch. Why aren't those channels specifically curated for me? And that's what we mean sort of by personalization. So if you put those two together and extrapolate those 10 years in the future, 2027 will be a very different place for video.
It sounds like there has to be a few things that need to change between the original content location and that screen or screens and those user scenarios that you just described. So what architecturally needs to change in order to get us to 2027 safely?
So it's a roadmap and it's a journey, right? So this is not a step change. This is something that's going to happen gradually. But if you step back and look, what fundamentally will change is all that video will be streamed. So where today the majority of our viewing, we're taking a broadcast signal, be that from a cable plant, be that from a satellite, or be that terrestrial broadcast. But it's a broadcast signal that's going to everybody at the same time. If you think about that mobile video concept, if you think about that concept of personalization, that's not going to be the case. So really where today we watch a portion of our video over IP that's streamed over IP, in the future it will all be streamed over IP. And that clearly creates challenges for operators in terms of how to architect the network, how to optimize the delivery, and how to recreate that broadcast experience but using streaming video. And that's where a lot of our innovation is focused on today.
Now, you also mentioned in the case of an airplane, it seems like it's not just going to be streaming, but also from time to time in the right context and the right understanding, bringing the video object down. So how is that different from today in terms of the way you decide the boundary of a stream versus a download?
I think it's all about intelligence. I mean, firstly, I think connectivity has to extend, right? So the connectivity has to extend and become really ubiquitous. Technology such as 5G, the increases in fiber technology will dramatically enable and really create truly ubiquitous connectivity, which we don't sort of really have today. So that will solve some of the problems, but not necessarily, obviously, all of it. The aeroplane being the sort of extreme example. But by the fact that that's television's personalized, the fact that it will know what's in my schedule, so it'll know I've got a flight coming up, right? You can start to use machine learning to really automatically predict what you're going to do, make sure you've suggested the right content, and maybe, as you say, that the content's downloaded because it looks in my calendar and knows I'm going to be sat on a flight for the next sort of 12 hours.
So it's interesting that we're putting in intelligence in the network that will have a great impact, a beneficial one on the user experience. But it sounds like it's also going to give you the opportunity to be highly more efficient, utilization, just in time, minimal viable streaming, if you will. So how does our network getting more intelligent also benefit the carriers, the deliverers, the content creators and owners? There must be an increased benefit for them on utility as well as the user experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, we think everything moves into the network and the intelligence becomes in the network. So what does that do immediately? That means that operators don't have to buy set-top boxes, right? They're expensive, they're very costly to maintain, they stay in the network a long time. They can have a much lighter client that basically just renders the user interface. And the first obvious example of that, which we're really heavily focused on at the moment, is the storage, right? So taking the hard drive out of the set-top box and putting that back into the network. We have some huge deployments going on with that at the moment in collaboration with HP using the Apollo platform to deploy high-dense storage systems that remove the need to ship a set-top box with a hard drive in. Now, what are the advantages of that? Everybody thinks it's cost. It's, you've taken the hard drive out, you now have the storage in the network. And that's clearly one element. But actually, if you talk to any operator, the biggest cause of subscriber churn is when somebody's set-top box fails and they lose those personalized recordings. So the personal connection you had with your service is no longer. So it's a lot easier to put your head up and look at competing services into low pick. So if that's in the network, then clearly you don't have that issue. So not only can you access it on your mobile devices, but it's protected and will always be with you. So that you sort of remove that sort of churn point.
Now, for the past decade or more, part of the solution to this problem was to employ a content delivery network and use that in a variety of ways. And it's sort of started with web pages and downloading files that were just flat graphic files. But now that's extended into all sorts of objects and content. So are we going to do away with the content delivery network? Are we going to refactor it? Is it going to evolve? How does that pan out over the next decade?
No, that's a good question. And the content delivery network of CDN will still exist. That still becomes a key way of optimizing video delivery. But it changes. If you go back again 10 years, the only CDNs available were CDNs in the internet. So it was a shared service. You bought capacity on a shared service. And actually, even today, that's how a lot of video from the content owners and broadcasters is streamed. For the past 7 years, we've been taking that technology and deploying it in private network with both telco and cable operators, so they can have their own private CDN. And there's a lot of advantages to having your own private CDN. You get complete control of the roadmap. You can start to introduce advanced features like targeted ad insertion and blackout and features like that to generate more revenue. And you have complete control over the quality of experience, which you don't if you outsource to a shared service. And what we're seeing now a little bit is both the programmers and broadcasters also looking to take interest in that private CDN because they want the control. Video is their business, so the quality of the delivery is even more important to them. So we're seeing a lot of the programmers and broadcasters start to look to want to adopt that private CDN model as well. The challenge there has always been how you build that. The challenge with CDNs is you have to build for peak. Peak is generally driven by sporting events, one-off news events, so that leaves you with a lot of capacity that's sitting idle a lot of the time. So with cloud and NFV and orchestration, we've solved that technically, right? We can add servers in very quickly, we can take them out very quickly, react to the traffic demands. We can technically move things around. But actually the commercial model had sort of lagged behind a little bit. So we've been working with HP Financial Services to understand how we can innovate on that commercial model as well and get that flexibility, not just from a technical perspective, but also from a commercial perspective.
Yeah, so tell me a bit about the private CDN. Is that a technology and a solution that Nokia is delivering? I suppose we need to know more about what your business unit does and then how the economic model benefits your marketplace.
Yeah, so we basically help as a business unit. We help anybody who has content, be it broadcasters, programmers, pay TV operators, deliver their content over IP, stream it over IP, and launch new services. So we have a product set which is very much focused around video networking. How do we optimize a video? How it's delivered, how it's streamed, how it's personalized. So we have a CDN product, which we've deployed for the last 7 years. We have the Cloud DVR product, which is all about moving the storage into the network. And then we have a systems integration practice, which sort of brings all that together and allows operators to bring other vendors and partners from the ecosystem into a complete end-to-end solution, but with us sort of taking the complexity away from them.
And with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise being a supplier to you of a lot of the hardware and infrastructure, how does the cost model change from the old model of pay up front, CapEx, licensing fees, and that sort of thing, to a new model that's more accommodative of the vision you've painted for IP video?
Yeah, I would class HP not necessarily as a supplier. I think they're a partner, right? We work very closely together. We use, the DL380s, the Apollo platforms, the Moonshot platforms, which are, world-leading compute and storage platforms that allow us to deliver these services cost-effectively. So we've had a long sort of technical relationship. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're now moving more towards how we do that commercial relationship. So working with the financial services team to look at how we can get flexibility. There's a lot of pay-as-you-grow type IT models that have been in existence from a financial perspective for some time, but they don't necessarily work for my application. In the CDN, in a video application, our goal is to use 100% of the storage all the time to maximize the cache hit rate. So if you find the commercial model, the traditional ones, which is you pay for storage, that my application fundamentally breaks that. So having a partner that was flexible and could understand the application was really important. The next one was we needed that scale. We needed to be able to deploy for the peak, but not pay for it all the time, right? That's easy from software. We solved it technology-wise, but we just needed that element as well. And the third one as well, we were trying to, as Nokia, we were trying to enter a new market, very much focused on the programmers and broadcasters, which is not our traditional segment. We've been deploying, CDN to the largest telcos and cable operators in the world, but that sort of programmer and broadcaster segment who is used to buying a service from the internet work in a different way and have different requirements. And so we needed a financial model that allowed us to address that, but also a partner who would take some of the risk, because we didn't know it was going to be successful. And thankfully it has, and we've grown incredibly, but it was a risk at the start. So finding a partner who could share some of that risk was really important.
Because, of course, these video delivery organizations are increasingly operating on a subscription basis, so they would like to have their costs be delivered on a subscription basis. It only makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's becoming more and more important, right? If you go back to the very first videos you watched of a cat falling off a chair on YouTube, right? It didn't matter if it buffered; it wasn't relevant. Now our tolerance for buffering, our tolerance for not having the highest quality, it just doesn't exist anymore. And if you go to where I said the TV is going to be until 2027, when it's purely IP, then clearly that has to deliver exactly the same quality of experience as we get today over broadcast technologies. And that creates challenges. I mean, the biggest obvious example, if you go to any pay TV operator and look at their streamed video channel that's live versus the one on the broadcast, there's a big delay. So there's a lag between the sort of live event and what you're seeing on your adaptive stream, which you sort of think, it's 30 to 40 seconds, probably doesn't make sense. But if you're in an apartment block watching a sporting event and your neighbour cheers 30 to 40 seconds before you, that creates a big issue. So a lot of the innovations we're doing at the moment is trying to take what can we do with the streaming technologies to deliver back that broadcast experience.
So we have to think about 4K at the edge, no latency, managed costs. Fortunately, at this time, HPE is also working on a lot of edge technologies like EdgeLine and Universal IoT and so forth. So there's more technology driven to the edge for storage, for memory processing, and so forth. How is that affecting your organization? And I've heard of something called skim storage. How does that fit into the equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two elements to that. I mean, the compute at the edge is absolutely critical, right? It's a big industry trend, but if you're going to move all the intelligence into the network, then clearly you need to reduce the latency, and you need to be able to scale that functionality. This functionality that was scaled in millions of households now has to be done in the network. So the only way you can effectively build the network to handle that scale is to put as much functionality as you can at the edge of the network. So some of the HP platforms that allow you to deploy that compute and storage deeper into the network are absolutely critical for our success. And we run our CDN, our ad insertion, and all that capability is deep into the network as an operator wants to go, and certainly the deeper the better. The other thing we're trying to optimize all the time is storage. One of the challenges with network-based recording, especially in the US, due to some of the content legislation, you have to store a copy per user. So if both of us record the same program, there are two versions of that in the cloud. That's clearly very inefficient. So the question is, how do you optimize that? And just-in-time transcoding is a technique that's been talked about for some time, which recreates the right quality of bitrate on the fly, so you don't have to store all the different formats. So it dramatically reduces your storage cost. The challenge has always been the CPU you needed to do that. And that's where a couple of things have sort of come in. Firstly, HP and the Moonshot platform has great compute density. You have the Intel media library for doing the transcoding. It's a really nice, polished platform. But we still wanted to get even more out of it. So we, using our Bell Labs research facility, we developed a facility called Skim Storage, which basically, for a slight increase in storage, allows us to double the number of transcodes we can do on a single CPU. So that takes a really, really efficient hardware platform with some nice technology and doubles the density we can get from it, and that's a big changer in the business case.
Yeah, it's astonishing to think of that much encoding happening on the fly for a mass market. That's a tremendous amount of intense compute requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to be intelligent about it, right? You know, at the end of the day, human behavior works in our favor a little bit. If you look at most programs that people record, if they've not watched them in the first 7 days, they're probably not really going to watch them. The odds of that recording live. So that content in particular, you can really optimize from a storage perspective, but you still need the ability to recreate it on the fly. But it changes the scale model a little bit.
So the more intelligent you can be about what the user's behavior is, or the patterns of general use are, the more efficient you can be. The intelligence seems to be the real key here.
Yeah, we have a number of algorithms, even within the CDN itself today, that predict content popularity. You know, we want to maximize the disk usage. We want the popular content on the disk. So what's the point of us deleting a piece of popular content just because a piece of long-tail content has been requested? So we do a lot of algorithms looking at and trying to predict the content popularity so that we can make sure we're optimizing the hardware platform accordingly.
All right, Paul, we've been learning a lot here, and I'd like to perhaps deepen our knowledge through some examples. Do you have some examples we can either name or refer to in use case terms that demonstrate how your clients and customers are taking these new technologies and making better business decisions that help them in their cost structure, but also deliver a far better user experience at the same time?
Yeah, sure. Let me give you a few different ones. So one of our largest customers is Liberty Global. Have a large number of cable operators in all sorts of countries across Europe, and they were basically having an IP service that they'd also started with an internet-based CDN, and that's how they were delivering that service. But recognizing the importance and wanting to get some control of the costs and control of the quality experience, wanted to take that in-house and put it on a private CDN. So we worked with them to deliver that technology. And one of the things that they noticed very quickly, which I don't think they were expecting, was a dramatic reduction in the number of people calling up to complain because, you know, the stream was stopped or it had buffered. So they got a big decrease in call center calls as soon as they switched it on to the technology, which is quite an interesting use case. Mm-hmm. We do a lot with Sky in the UK, who again were looking to migrate away from an internet-based service CDN into something in-house, right? So they could take control of it and improve the quality of experience. One of our customers in Canada, TELUS, when they deployed a private CDN and took it away from the internet, they got a payback in less than 12 months in terms of the savings that they got from a network perspective, and as well as just the pure CDN cost, because now they have their own private CDN. So some really interesting examples there of some great services.
Great, thank you. All right, before we close out, perhaps a look to the future. We have talked about the future actually most of the time here today, but thinking about some of the requirements on business models as we leverage that intelligence, as we deploy more of these edge platform capacity and performance issues and requirements, what about that personalization? What about perhaps inserting ads in a different way, or added on services, ancillary services to the actual entertainment, more of a two-way street relationship, one-on-one perhaps with the customer? How does this manifest through your network in terms of your architecture and what you foresee as some of the increased benefits from that architecture?
I mean, all of that generates more traffic, right? Everything that generates more traffic, moving from SD to HD to 4K to beyond 4K generates more traffic. You then take into account 360 video and VR, and as Nokia, obviously, we have the Ozo camera, which is one of the world's leading broadcast 360 cameras. The data is just going to explode. So being able to optimize and continue to optimize that, and in terms of new codec technology, new streaming technologies, to be able to sort of try and constrain the growth of video, where if we didn't do any technical innovation, the traffic would just explode. So there's a lot of innovation going on to try and optimize really what's going on there. And we think the content will sort of change a little bit, and I think VR will see a lot of I guess it's hard to see potentially people watching most of their TV through VR headsets because it takes away the social element, which I think is a key element of television. But you can very much see that after you've watched the latest episode of Game of Thrones, maybe there's a uniquely created piece of content that's sort of an add-on in 360 that the real series fans can start to go and look at. So I think we'll see new types of content being created to sort of address these different use cases.
Well, great. I look forward to that. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been examining how Nokia is refactoring the video delivery business. And we've heard about how new video delivery architectures and creative ways that media companies are paying for them are adding to a very auspicious future for providers of content and consumers as well. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Paul Larby. He's the head of the video business unit at Nokia based in Cambridge, UK. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. It's great to chat.
And thanks as well to our audience for joining us for this Briefings Direct Voice of the Customer Digital Transformation Success Story. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise sponsored interviews. Thanks again for listening, and come back next time.